Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the October 23rd meeting of the Baltimore City Board of Finance. My name is Michael Moiseyev. I am the city's finance director, sitting in today for the Honorable Mayor Brandon M. Scott. This meeting is in a hybrid format for those of you watching on Charm TV and those of you here in person. All members of the board have received a copy of the minutes from the last meeting from August 28th and have had a chance to review. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move it.
And I second.
Thank you. Having been moved and seconded, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We'll now go to the second item in the agenda, and that is a presentation for the board's consideration and approval of the security transactions. I will now pass it to the clerk of the board, Janelle Rogers.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Janelle Rogers, Chief of the Bureau of Treasury Management. Today we have the security transactions covering the period August 21st through October 13th, 2023. Total purchases, $79,115,000. And then for our redemptions, we have $267,340,000. And all the purchases were made under the direction and guide of our investment policies.
A question?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember seeing such a large gap between purchases and redemptions. Is there a particular reason this month that it was such a wide variation?
Some of it we have been holding cash in our reserve.
Okay.
So if there's money sitting there to cover certain, we may have to stretch out for the week. So we wouldn't make a purchase during that time. We would just hold that cash.
Okay.
To cover those outgoing expenses for the week.
Thank you. And with that, I move for approval of the purchases and the redemptions for the month of October 2023.
Second.
Thank you. The motion having been moved and seconded, we will now go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Next item, presentation on the status of mark-to-market valuation for the city's interest rate exchange swaps agreement portfolio since the last board meeting. Again, Ms. Rogers.
Yes. So this report covers September 30th, 2023. And as you can see, our swap or our derivatives portfolio is shrinking. We have the water, the fair market value is $5,173,347, and the parking swap, the value is $4,018,301, giving us a value at the end of September of $9,191,648, compared to the previous report, which was $10,189,481. And we have, the last time we reported was July, the last report you received was July of 2023. And as you can see, the rates increased for the 10-year Treasury from 3.97 to 4.59%, which shows you this is an adverse relationship. So whenever the interest rate goes up, the value of our portfolio shrinks. Okay. And this is basically for reporting. No approval is needed.
Any questions for Ms. Rogers? No. Do I have a motion to approve?
We don't need one.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Well, this report is noted for the record. Next item, presentation for the board's consideration and approval of the fiscal year 2025 to 2030 Baltimore City Public Schools Capital Improvement Plan. Ms. Rogers?
Yes, and Good afternoon again. We're requesting that the board consider and approve the Capital Improvement Program for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal years 2026 through 2030. The program includes $114 million in city bond funds and $1,013,475 in state funds for a total of $1,127,575 million. The Baltimore City Public Schools is required to submit annually an updated and detailed capital program to the State Interagency Committee on School Constructions. This must be done to meet the requirements to receive the school construction funds from the state. Before submission, it must be approved by the school board, the Planning Commission, Board of Finance, and Board of Estimates. Once approved by these bodies, the mayor will support and approve the program. So today I would like to turn over the presentation to the Baltimore City Public School System, Maureen Gershberg and Christian Ahern from Planning to provide details on the CIP.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Maureen Gershberg. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Real Estate from Baltimore City Public Schools. You have the presentation in front of you, I believe, or?
Yes.
Okay,
we do.
great. All right. So when we introduce our CIP every year, we like to also talk about our current landscape. When you look at what the industry standard is for funding for maintenance and capital combined and what city schools receives, there's an annual deficit of about $204 million. And so we like to keep that in the back of our minds when we talk about the projects that we're putting forth and our overall prioritization strategies. When you look at neighboring jurisdictions, city schools receive significantly less than some of our neighbors. If you look at Montgomery County, they have just over twice as many kids as us, but you'll see that their capital funding is significantly more, almost 4 to 5 times more than us. So it's, while we look at kind of the amount of funding that it is coming in, we also do like to look at our neighbors and say, okay, what are other people receiving? Maybe there's something that might be better balanced there. For our funding sources, we use different pots of money. And when we look at them, we look at not only the amount, but the frequency. So the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, is something that happens every single year. So it's a reliable source of income, even though we have, the amounts can change. Historically, it was around $35 million. Last year, when Governor Moore came in, he released additional funds to all LEAs in the state, and so we ended up getting $46 million in CIP funding, and that was very exciting. But historically, we think it's dependable to get about $35 million in the CIP. Also, annually, we get money from the city as well, and that's historically been around $19 million. So those are the kind of reliable funds that we count on when we look at some of our out years of projects. Healthy Schools Funds is a specific pot of money from the state that we also get.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
On the 2 pots from the city, I noticed there were...
One pot.
1 pot, but
Yeah.
there were 2 sources, correct?
1 pot from the city, 1 pot from the state.
But for the city, the taxes were from two sources. Am I correct about that?
Beverage container and table gaming.
Okay, just those
Okay.
2. And is the city limited to those 2? Why those 2 and why only those 2?
I'm sorry, I can't speak to why the city chose the specific
But are those
sources.
2 dedicated for this purpose?
Yeah. I can speak to you at length about the historicity of it.
But it's dedicated to, the cap is a function of how much comes in those 2 sources. That's the point I'm trying to ask.
It's not, I mean, I think technically it's not a cap in that theoretically the city could give more. This is sort of the floor. The floor, this is what we've committed to making sure we provide on an annual basis.
This is the minimum from those 2
Yeah,
sources.
Correct.
Thank you.
Two other sources of funding that have multiple years. From the state, we have the Healthy Schools Facility Funds, but that is set to terminate or to end, sunset, in FY26. From the federal side, we have ESSER funds, and so that's those were associated with COVID. So we have, it stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. There was 2 years that we were able to utilize capital funds for that. And those need to be spent by September 2023 and September 2024. One-time pots of money are, from the state side, are Build to Learn, which we're all very excited about, but we've decided to invest those in some of our high schools, which are very expensive. So while it was a significant fund, it is we've spent it in essence. And there's also the pass-through grant that was associated with the current funding in Build to Learn. That's also going to be filling in some of the gaps with the high school plan as well as Build to Learn. Non-state funds is 21st Century. We were able to refinance that pot of money to be able to do an additional school. That was Frederick Douglass campus, which will be with Joseph Briscoe. And so that's also a one-time fund, which is about $117 million. So those are the different pots of money that we're able to utilize for capital spending. And again, we like to think of it in terms of the reoccurring, the one-time, and then also state versus non-state. Okay. When we make priority decisions on projects, we think of it from an objective standpoint, like we look at work orders, we look at life cycle costs, but we also look at district priorities. So if we know that as part of our annual review, we've slated for a school to close, even though our computerized maintenance management system might say a building needs a new roof, we know that if it's slated to close, that we won't be requesting a new roof for that building. And so we layer in those various objective items along with district priorities when we go to make our project priority lists. Because as you'll see, the need is greater than what the overall funding is. To create our project list, we start with projects that were unfunded from the previous year. We then pull out anything that we could possibly cover with this year's Healthy Schools Fund, that one that I said is sunsetting soon. We add in projects that our CMMS, Computerized Maintenance Management System, has flagged for us. So again, those systems or that might be flagged as being at the end of their life cycle, having a lot of work orders, et cetera. And then we do a final review to make sure that we're meeting those district priorities that we discussed. We also look at the distribution of our projects. We have a tool called the Community Conditions Index, where we look at prior historic investments in Baltimore, and we like to see where our projects, where we're choosing to invest our funds, are when you think about it from a geographic perspective. And so you'll see that a lot of our funds, a lot of our projects and like the overall quantities are being invested in those areas that historically have seen less investment in Baltimore. So when we look forward, on our plate right now, and we're finished up with some, but a lot are still underway, we have 73 ESSER projects, so that's that federal funding. Those were primarily health suite and restroom renovations. We have, this past fiscal year, 24 Healthy Schools projects, which were primarily windows, doors, and I think a few roofs. And then this year we have 38 systemic projects for the CIP. Systemic means roof, windows, doors, HVAC. It's a specific system. It's not the whole building. So we have 38 of those within this year's request. For major projects, we have two that we're including, two new ones that have not been approved yet for prior funding within the CIP. Within the presentation, we have included all the other major projects as well, just because even though the CIP is a specific pot of money, it's not the entire pot that we use for our capital funding. So in addition to the projects within the CIP, we do have other projects that are underway, including the Build to Learn ones and finishing up our 21st Century schools as well. So in summary, the City Schools is requesting $19 million from the city to support our CIP program and $190 from the state.
I still don't understand. Is there a short answer why we're limited to $19 million?
Well, far be it from me to speak on behalf of the Bureau of Budget and Management Research, but my understanding
If
is
they make the decision.
that the city, that's done annually during the budget process. The city determines how much we have available.
So that's a given.
I had another question, which is I had apparently missed the refinancing of 21st Century Schools, because I was curious that it wasn't listed on here the way I would have thought it. But maybe I was just looking in the 20. Okay, let me ask this question a little differently. Where are we in the 21st Century Schools project?
All right, so think of it as phase 1 and phase 2. The initial list, we have 2 schools remaining. Cross Country, who opens in January of 2024. Commodore John Rogers, who's going to open summer 2026. The refinancing allowed us to do Frederick Douglass, so think of that as phase 2. That's slated to open, I believe, 2026 as well.
Okay, that's phase 1.
Frederick Douglass is phase 2. The original 29 buildings, that's phase 1.
Okay, so City and Poly,
That's Built to Learn, that's a separate pot of money.
that is a different pot of, those are not being done under 21st Century Schools.
Correct. So we have our high school plan, which is Frederick Douglass, Poly Western City, and then also Edmondson and Ben Franklin.
Okay.
Edmondson and Ben Franklin are part of the CIP request this year, which were not approved last year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
The ones that you fund last year's, what you don't do last year, you carry forward. How much was carried forward in this year's budget?
So the projects that we carried
And
forward,
what did they total?
I can't do I only have JPEGs to look off of, but I can pull the, sorry, give me a second. I can pull the quantity.
That's not, but my principal question is how much will we carry forward from this year to next year that we can't do?
From this year to next year, we don't, so the timeline of the CIP from the state, we submit it in the fall, and then the state is still determining how much money is available for CIP. So at a minimum, they have said publicly that we'll get 25 million. We think it's very, very, very likely that the number is going to increase because it does every year, but that final amount will not be determined until the legislature is done in May. And so the way they go about this is they do percent allocations. So in November, we'll know 75% of the funding. In January, we'll know 90%. So we don't know that final amount until May. I think it is going to be between 35 and 46 million based upon historic funding. We have asked for 190 million. We know that the need, again, is much greater than what we'll get. But part of it is just also, we also know that things can shift. Projects might come in more expensive than we thought, and we have to swap out things.
How will you determine what you don't fund?
So we don't determine that necessarily. When we submit the project list, it's in a priority number.
So it has a priority.
Correct, yes.
I understand.
And it typically starts with our major projects, followed by the systemics.
Thank you.
Just one little comms question. On page 11 of the slide presentation, the looking forward / recommendation, this is a digital version of a Xerox or a scanned in of, I can't quite tell. Is that a real school building or is that just clip art?
It's probably a rendering, but it is complete. That is either Holabird or Graceland in southeast Baltimore.
But it was a rendering. That's why it has that, like,
Yes,
slightly less than photorealism
That is a
aspect. Okay.
rendering, yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I have 3 real quick questions.
Yes.
So, during the summer, we often hear about schools not being able to be in attendance because we haven't finished with the HVAC or something like that. So has that been prioritized in this particular budget or your past budget? And where are we with the completion of that priority?
Yeah, Yes, so we only have 11 of the original 75 schools that did not have air conditioning. I believe there's a slide in the appendix about it, maybe. Sorry, I think that might have gotten cut. But about half of them are going to be addressed as part of the major projects that we're doing. So City College doesn't have AC. That's going to get addressed through the major project. And then the other half are going to be HVAC projects. Some of them are within the CIP. Some of them are currently underway. Some of them will be done through the Healthy Schools Fund. So yes, we have made a lot of progress in addressing that, and we're down to just 11.
Okay. And then to pick up from Mr. Shelton's question, really deals with it from a budgetary standpoint. When we look at the budgeted project costs versus what you all are finding as your actuals, how much of the current ask is being carried over because of overruns?
Yeah, so when we talk about overruns, I'm going to talk about it before it goes out to bid. All right, so probably up until probably this winter, the bids coming in were a lot higher than what was approved 2 years ago. And so when that happens, we find ourselves in the position that we might have to rescind other projects to be able to help other projects move forward. Or we might rescind a project and say, okay, we're going to cover this with Healthy Schools next year. So that was a pretty, we've felt that a lot the past couple of years, but I think that's started to slow down the imbalance. Our bids just came in recently for, I believe, Armistead, and we had expected something much higher, and it was lower than what we had buffered for, so.
And so year to year, as you come back for the budget or the funding requests, have you been reflecting the overruns so that we can tell the difference? So if as an example, you have identified that we need 35 million more, or you now have a list of your priorities, just knowing the distinction between what we have already approved to get done versus what was pushed to another year, I would think illustrating that would be important for us to know the difference. Did we see this last year? And did the numbers shift on us?
Yeah, so when we have to rescind a project, we have to notify the IAC, they have to approve it, and then we have to, let me think. I think we provide the, I need to check on this, but I believe we provide the higher amount and then they have to approve it. We can't just move forward with the higher amount. We do need approval from the IAC if their funds are involved.
But what about from the Board of Finance under the CIP? So last year I remember when we were presented the materials, a lot of it pertained to the 21st century. This year we're seeing less of the 21st century, but I thought there were some items on last year, was it Furman? Was last year. We see it again this year.
Yeah.
And it's just making me wonder, when we see the number difference, are we seeing something that went sideways? Whether it's in the pre-development cost or the construction cost that shift the budget post-approval, but we never bring the attention back to the past approval.
So With, I think you're referring to Furley Elementary, and then other CIP projects that have received prior funding are Armistead Gardens, Marie G. Faring Annex, and Northeast Middle. Yep, that's it. So a couple of those costs did come in higher. So as the part of the process, we just resubmitted it to the CIP, said we provided the bids that came in, we provided proof showing how construction costs have escalated significantly in the past years. They approve it, and then yes, as part of the CIP, if we know we're going to be pulling more funds as part of that draw schedule, that is updated in the 102.4. That's part of like the standard paperwork of this.
Okay. And in my final question of the three really is more of a question that just concerns me. If the public schools are spending so much on capital improvement in a certain community, how is that prioritized in relationship to other things that may be happening in a community? And I'm going to use Edmondson Village as an example. We know last year your presentation included Edmondson. This year it feels like it's closer, but just other things that you read in a paper, there are other things happening within that community that make you believe that there could be closer public-private type relationships. Does the public school system pay that any attention?
Yes, so we have considered public-private partnerships, P3s, and that is something that we look at.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions for Baltimore City Public Schools?
I just wanted to clarify that the action today is for the fiscal 25 to 30 capital improvement program. The school system, I'm Kristen Ahern from Department of Planning. The capital improvement, the school system operates on a slightly different timeline because so much of their funding comes from the state public school construction program. So we approve theirs on a cycle outside of our normal capital improvement program. But I just wanted to clarify that this action is related to only the $19 million in city GO bonds that will be programmed in the fiscal 25 capital budget and in the subsequent 5 years of the CIP. So we are not taking any action related to the 21st Century Schools program, which is the $1 billion bond that's paid back by the bottle tax and other sources within the city. It's just the 19 million years in GO bond that is regular funding in addition to some of these other sources that Maureen has talked about.
Thank you so much. Okay, I will now take a motion to approve.
Move it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. The motion having been moved and seconded, we will now go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda, presentation for the board's consideration and approval of an ordinance to amend the bond resolution for the wastewater revenue obligations. Again, Ms. Rogers.
Yes, thank you. So once again, we are presenting, or we're here to present a resolution to amend the water and wastewater ordinance. And so the first part of the amendment addresses the borrowing capacity for the wastewater utility. The city charter mandates that an ordinance by the city council be approved to authorize revenue bond authorizations. The current authorization, which was approved by this board, last approved by this board in April 2014, established a limit of $2,363 million. And that was enacted by ordinance number 1423. This request and the previous request provides the ability to fund additional or future projects in the CIP. So this, and also this ordinance also approves, I'm sorry, I lost my place. It's based on the current 2014 and 2019 wastewater utility fund. As you noted in this table, what I showed you was what the, without the approval of this amendment, what effect this will have on our borrowing capacity. So I gave you a before and after picture. So right now, the current amount of the authorization is $2,363 million. Our available capacity now is $104 million. We have a CIP of $800.4 million. If we leave the authorization or the ordinance as it is now, we will have to request an additional $696 million. So if you go to page 2, after amendment, when we consider what's outstanding, which we start out with the authorization of $2.3 billion. We have outstanding debt of $1.6 million, which leaves us available capacity of $729 million. Over the next 6 years, we amortize approximately $63.7 million, which will add additional capacity over the next 6 years of another $382 million, which gives us a subtotal of $1.1 billion. When we take into account the $800 million in the CIP, it leaves us an additional $311 million. So if we did not consider this, the first change in the amendment, we will have to be coming to the board to ask for additional $693 million, which brings our authorizations up to $3 billion. The additional amendments to the resolution is to allow interfunding between the water and wastewater to fund the stormwater utility. It also permits the bonds to be issued even if there's a default, which will provide the city with the flexibility to remedy any other such default with the issuance of additional authorization. So basically what that means is if we were in default because of a debt service coverage, the way it's written now, the city could not issue additional bonds to remedy that situation. So if we approve this, if the city can now go out and issue bonds to bring our debt service coverage back into compliance with our resolution, with our indenture. This also requires, the next amendment requires that the rate and charges be assessed and collected to extent deemed necessary to operate the facilities and provide payment for outstanding obligations. The other 3 minor things is modernize the terms and allow the Board of Finance to determine the application of the bond premium and other excess proceeds, determine the interest rates, and prepare and distribute the official statement. So we provided you with the project list for the next 5 years of our CIP, as well as the draft of the amendments or the legislation that we want to present to City Council for approval. I also have representatives here for DPW, Department of Public Works, if you have any questions for them.
I just have
Well, as to the First Amendment, the way I read that is that currently, if it's a refunding, you've got to count those. So what this does is you don't have to count the refunding when you count the amount of the bonds. That in effect, if you defease bonds, you still have to count it. With the First Amendment, you don't have to count it. So it strikes me that's a slam dunk, and the instrument should have been drafted that way to begin with, but that was in 2014, and we've had all these refundings since then. I see that, I see it.
If we retire bonds.
If you retire bonds.
Exactly.
Exactly. So if they're defeased or retired, you don't have to count them anymore. So that's a slam dunk. I don't really understand the ability to issue new bonds if there's a default in the covenant. Would that require an agreement of the existing bondholders to make that change?
I don't think that requires them.
How can you if the bond indenture says that you have to meet certain coverage calculations, or, I mean, that's an agreement. I don't know how you can, I'm talking in the abstract because I haven't
Right.
seen those documents, but I don't know how.
So one of the things is if we were in a default coverage, we we're required to do an engineer's report. We would have to engage consultants to come in and,
So the current bond indenture provides that mechanism?
yes, that we would have to bring them in and provide us basically with a guide of how we can bring everything back into compliance with the indenture.
So the only thing, so if you get back into compliance by, what, a consultant?
Yes, with an engineer's report from a
I'm
consultant.
seeing a frown from, you're agreeing with this? You're fine with that? So this, under the current bond indenture, this would be permissible? Wouldn't require their consent?
As far as,
Hi, I'm Kimberly Mann. Can you see me down?
You got to come over to the, because this is being televised.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Kimberly Mann. I'm bond counsel to the city for their water wastewater program. So if I understand your question correctly, you're asking that because there are existing bonds outstanding for current bondholders,
Correct.
right, under the current indenture,
Correct.
would this amendment to the ordinance require their approval? And the answer to that is no.
Why?
Why? Because, under the trust indenture, the city is able to amend their ordinances from time to time. So then the question becomes more narrowed, which is whether under the indenture you have the possibility of being able to issue bonds in accordance with the four corners of the indenture, and that's the agreement with the bondholders. That will be-
My question is simple, and it's a yes or no. Is the contract with the current bondholders permits this change in the ordinance, by ordinance?
Yes.
All right. Surprised at that.
So my question is just totally different, and that is in looking at your revenue bond funding schedule at the end that shows the amount of 133 million is needed for 24. And when you look at your memo, 104 million is available. It would basically say regardless of whether you were considering the payback or that you still need this now just to because the 104 alone isn't sufficient to
Right.
even get you through 24.
That's where I'm confused, because the before amendment says that right now, before we do anything, we still have $529 million worth of borrowing capacity. And that is still more than the entire existing CIP budget through fiscal 29. So I don't understand how that can be true, and we need money right now to cover next year.
okay, so what we have left is the 104.
Where is that in writing?
Well, this is on the first table, but we have a schedule that we keep at Treasury. So if you go to the first page.
Of the memo.
Of the memo?
Okay, yes. So down at the bottom of the table.
Yeah.
Currently, we have $104 million.
That's not on the table that I'm looking at. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong.
Wastewater, looking at wastewater?
No, I'm looking at water, because that's first.
Yeah, it was the,
I skipped, I'm sorry, I went in the wrong.
That would explain why the numbers you were saying weren't matching the numbers I was looking
Well,
at.
according
you're
to-
you're taking it in the order of your presentation.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're on wastewater, dude.
We're on
Wastewater,
wastewater, but
yes.
then the memo after the wastewater resolution is the memo for water.
Right, because we have three. We have water, we have wastewater, water, and stormwater.
Correct.
Okay, so
yours is water. That was the second one.
now I'm looking for the memo for wastewater.
You should go backwards. Correct.
I'll tell you what. Well, see, this will be paper working better. Then, okay, so this is,
It was,
Here you go.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's the same one that he's got. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
We're good?
We're good with that. I'm kind of curious how we got here. If we were this close to the cap, why we got within months of next year's CIP without raising this like last year.
It's just the timing, because we still had, based on what we had in the pipeline, we know that, we wasn't going to exhaust what we had.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only other thing, I just feel obligated to mention this, although it's not a hill I'm prepared to die on, is we are in the process of technically studying how we're going to be dealing with our water and wastewater system, which is going to have potential ramifications for how it gets financed going into the future. There is a temptation to say we could put this off a month or two until we get a little bit closer to figuring out whether or not the recommendations of the Water Governance Task Force are going to have an actual impact on the financing of our system or not. If out of an abundance of caution you want to raise the limit before then, like I said, I don't know that it's
Well, right now, based on
problem
we
per se.
we don't have to raise the limit, but we still need to change. If we don't change the way the ordinance is written, then we will have to raise the limit.
Okay. So now we're back to the slam dunk. Okay.
Can I ask are these bonds, how were they sold? Were they competitively bid?
Normally, with the utilities, they're negotiated.
And are they rated?
Yes.
And what are they rated?
It's double A.
Double A? Good. Do I see a frown back there?
I was just going to say, some of the bonds.
If you're going to talk, you got to come up and.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
I'm Joanne Levin from the Law Department, and I would just say that some of our bonds are also sold to the state and to the federal government. So they're not all negotiated sales in the public bond market.
But they're all double A.
Well, the ones that we sell to the state and to the federal government are not.
Not rated.
They're not technically
They're
rated.
not rated.
Only the publicly sold bonds are. I just wanted to add
Okay.
that one
Thank
thing.
you.
so Janelle, are we asking only for the change in the ordinance language and not for the increase in the ordinance amounts, or both?
Right, so it kind of like goes hand in hand.
Okay.
If you approve the amendment to the way we calculate the borrowing authority or the excess borrowing authority, then we would not need the rate increase. So basically, technically, you're voting to approve the amendment, so we don't have to ask for that increased capacity.
All right. Are there any other questions? All right, I will now entertain a motion to approve.
Move it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion having been moved and seconded, we will go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain on these three just out of an abundance of caution.
And the abundance of caution is what?
I'm chairing the task force that's studying the water bill.
Are there any votes against? All right, the ayes have it. The motion is approved. Next up, we have the presentation for the board's consideration and approval of an ordinance to amend the bond resolution for the water revenue obligations. We are now in the water section. And again, Chief Rogers.
Yes, thank you. And this one is basically similar to the wastewater request. The only difference is, as you noted, Comptroller, that there is some capacity left. But just to make sure that all our ordinances or our resolutions read the same, then the request is the same to include that amendment to how we calculate the borrowing capacities, and then everything else, the provisions are identical.
All right. Seeing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move it.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstention noted. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion is approved. And finally, presentation for the board's approval of an ordinance to increase the stormwater revenue bond authorization limit. Again, Chief Rogers.
Thank you. So the stormwater is a newer utility. So when we first established the stormwater utility, we asked for, based on the CIP at the time, they had $202 million in their CIP. But as we go forward for the next 5 years, they're going to need additional borrowing authority. So based on the current CIP, they will need $118 million, which will bring their borrowing authority to $320 million.
Any questions on the stormwater resolution?
My only question really deals with a timing. Just if it's relatively new, there's a third increase, one third increase in the authorization request. So what causes such an increase? And then second, the timing of the spend, because I'm going back to a similar question from Comptroller Henry as to the necessity of now versus later, but more importantly, is there control over the cost of the this particular stormwater project? And I know it's multiple projects.
Right, and I guess once again, it's just being prepared. And if someone from DPW, you know how fast your projects are coming to market.
Good morning, Darnell Ingram, General Counsel, Chief Compliance Officer of DPW. Yeah, with our stormwater, we have delayed many of these capital improvement projects, but now with our current CIP, we're also in the process of getting a 10-year master plan for stormwater. This is to ensure that we're compliant with our MS4 permit as well as our infrastructure. As you all may have noticed, over the years we've had a couple of potholes related to our stormwater, so this is a way for the city and DPW to ensure that we are, one, compliant with MS4 permit as well as with our infrastructure to ensure and mitigate any losses of our stormwater utility in the future. This is good planning on part of our Office of Engineering Construction. And to answer your second question about controls, we actually have instituted a finance committee that manages and oversees any of these finance requests related to bonds, albeit bonds into the market, or we get loans from WIFIA or as well as the state. We have a finance committee that manages both the priorities as well as the financing structures to ensure that we have the appropriate source funds to ensure that these capital projects are prosecuted efficiently and effectively.
All right, are there any other questions? All right, I will now entertain a motion to approve.
Move it.
Second.
A motion having been moved and seconded, we will now go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
The abstentions noted. The ayes have it. Motion is approved. All right, and that takes us to the end of the agenda. The next scheduled meeting will be on November the 27th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move it.
Second.
All right, having been moved and seconded, we are adjourned.
Thank you.